So I'm going to guess that most of these plants, if you get a standard suite out of a soils lab, and it says this is okay, I mean, and when it says medium, that means there's a medium chance that if you added fertilizer, you'd get any kind of growth response. That's all they're trying to tell you. They're not, or if it's low, it means you're probably going to get a growth response. So if you get something that's medium and low, and you're not trying to grow a production, you know, an ag type crop, I think most of those characteristics will be in good shape. If we're reading about blueberries and rhododendrons, yeah, those are special things, and if you put one of those in, you better, you know, keep track of that specific area. But I don't know that all these other plants are so specific that you're going to have a different soil setup. I mean, we're struggling to get our soil kind of in the ballpark, right? And now we're not going to have, you know, super and unleaded and diesel soils. We're just going to have something. So I think it's pretty average. I wouldn't worry about that. But that's the intensive. That's the small part of the soil. The other 2 or 3 things he mentioned, compaction, drainage, those are extensive, and you can't test for those in a soil baggie anyway. You got to go out there and dig a backhoe pit and say, holy moly, that just broke my wrist. That tells you something.
Yeah, getting your contractor to actually do a perk test. You know, you always ask them to. Do you get them to do it?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and having
I see that struggle a lot. I see it with my own guys getting them to do perk tests when they're supposed to. So I know it's a lot of people rush through a lot of those things and skip those steps.
No, it's very important. I just came from the construction site today, and we poured below about 22 feet to reach to the layer.
Wow.
It's a lot of money, but it's without that, the 24 hours, just water just stand there. It didn't even move.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah, there's the tool, you have a penetrometer, which is like a soil probe, but it's got a little gauge on it. So as you push that down in, you can see how much resistance you're getting. So that's a tool that you can carry around with you to measure the compaction.
You jump on a shovel too.
Yeah, this has a gauge. It's a really good tool for the contract because it's got the little dial, and you can tell them to get one. They get one. They're out there pushing around, and it's
It's more fun than a perk test.
well, and then there's these portable percolation test things. Have you seen those? It's like it's a cylinder, and you set the cylinder down into the ground. So instead of digging the
So
pit,
you don't have to dig a hole?
dig the hole, fill it with
Oh,
water,
that's
stick the stake in
crazy.
it. It's this device that I don't know, it looks like a coffee percolator, and you stick it on the ground and you fill it with the water, and then it measures it. The cylinder is where it's
It's more like a
measuring
home
water.
gardener than a like get the equipment, dig a hole. Contractors dig holes.
Well, yeah, that's when the contractor's on board.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's after you've got somebody, you've already contracted the guy to do it, and he's out there, and everybody kind of throws their hands up. So these are the tools that you can do for your site survey when you're getting out there and developing the site and finding out what your conditions are, what your challenges are going to be.
This is a story to get a good contractor, because not to mention any names, we had a contractor with one of these soil probes with the dial, and he's going out there on hard stuff and getting, you know, no resistance at all. He's leaning down on it, oh, it's fine, there's no compaction. And I've done this before, I know something's wrong here. He had the set screw on the probe cinched down tight, so he could have gone into the wall and it wouldn't have given any compaction. And he was pretty convinced I was making a big stink, because, you know, I was from academics, you know, whatever, this, you know, it's your dial, you know. So just make sure you have somebody who's kind of into the game, you know.
So I'm loving all this discussion about contractors, so I'm curious, in your opinion, as a contractor, what is the proper way to actually incorporate amendments into the soil?
I would say there's not one way. It's going to depend on the site.
All right.
10 years ago, I would have said the only way is to till it in.
Mhm.
But we're doing a lot of sheet mulching now
Okay.
of existing lawns and existing landscapes. And I didn't believe in that until I saw it myself, until I sheet mulched an acre and watched, I saw it before. I saw the cardboard and compost on top of it. And when we did our inspection for our bay-friendly rating, in 2 months, I couldn't find the cardboard. It's gone, totally disintegrated. And I'm literally pushing my hand down wrist deep through this profile of compost cardboard in the old turf. And the power of soil biology that was in that compost to break down the turf that was there and start to aggregate the soil below that and naturally aerate it was phenomenal to me. I never would have believed that could happen.
So what about most contractors? Are they all still
No.
rototilling?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I still see the specs. Unfortunately, I still see naturalized sawdust too. It's amazing to me when somebody forgot to change their old spec, but we haven't used naturalized sawdust in 5 years probably. There's plenty of organic compost out there, and in fact, it's cheaper than nitro anyway. So I don't know why anybody would do
It lasts longer.
Yeah.
It lasts a whole lot longer.
Yeah, and in fact, we're not even, for the most part, we don't even fertilize. No more plant tabs and that type of stuff. The big opportunity for us, a lot of it is renovations, and that's, there's new development, but the fact is that as the economy slowed down, there's less new development, and a lot of people are renovating existing properties, and that's most of my background. It's not in new development. And the opportunity to shift a site from the herbicides and pesticides that have been damaging that site and the synthetic fertilizers that are causing the huge dead zones in our oceans and all that, by shifting to organic, by putting in a fertigation system. And you get huge labor savings because there's the biggest cost of fertilizing lawns and shrubs. Most people don't actually fertilize shrubs, but lawns is the labor involved. And fertigation systems are super cheap. A passive system that goes just after your backflow, and an easy way to put in organic fish emulsion or some other liquid, low nitrogen organic fertilizer, and the food for the soil biology. In addition, you can push humic acid and other soil foods through that, and you can push pest control products. So organic gopher control products we're having great success with right through your fertigation system, which doesn't kill them, it just drives them off of wherever your fertigation's at. So I'm a huge fan of sheet mulching and fertigation both, to move away from the old synthetic ways.
And that's a big part too, is after all this process of getting the soil test, putting in the organic, getting the stuff to start, is then following up and testing the soil to see that it's alive.
Yeah.
And checking for the little nematodes and
Protozoa,
bugs and
bacteria,
everything that's in there.
Which labs do that?
Soil Food Web in Oregon is who I've used.
Are they the only ones?
That I know of, yes.
They're on the East Coast too.
Are they?
Not
So,
like
Oregon.
competition then, that's
No, it's both
price
Food
up.
Web.
but yeah, you won't find contractors looking at doing biological tests and suggesting that. No, I think it's fairly rare.
You made the comment about managing the soil after it's prepared, and you mentioned minimize irrigation. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Are you looking at me? Yeah, okay.
Most of the work we do is irrigated. And
Yeah.
Ornamental landscapes that are meant to be irrigated, but there is a trend, and people want to wean the plants and the landscape off of irrigation, maybe even in these urban landscapes, suburban landscapes in 2 to 5 years, we may get away from irrigation, managed landscape. But could you talk about why you mentioned minimize irrigation?
So the question is, how do you manage lower or reduced irrigation? And the first thing is, I don't have the turf green lawns and that kind of thing, just for the record. But a big problem of shallow irrigation, especially when you've got a 5 or 6 inch soil profile over something that's hard, is that you have such easy evaporation of that water, and even a little bit of salt in the water. We're not talking salty water, but Sacramento water or East Bay water. that stuff will eventually salt up your surface layer because you're evaporating 80% or whatever it is of what you use. So what we try and do is get the water on and down deep enough so that when that surface dries out, it forms kind of a dry mulch, mineral mulch, to keep it from evaporating more. And we don't mind on our plantings, which are, you know, clump grasses and shrubs and stuff, not turf, letting that surface 8-10 inches dry out, and then you can go deep and find the water that you need. And so that's how we can get away with no watering or 1 or 2 waterings per year. But it's a different kind of a landscape, xeriscape or whatever, than a turf ornamental lawn with privet hedges, just so you know. But the problem is, if you evaporate a lot of stuff off, then you're building up a salt load and you're training the roots to be shallow, and it just exacerbates that problem. So we want to go deep. That's the
Marcia,
basic.
you specifically mentioned that, I remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll just, one thing is that the more organic rich the soil is, the more water it's just going to naturally hold. So that should minimize the need for, you should be able to reduce your irrigation needs if you have compost on your soils, for example. The other thing that I was just thinking of as we're talking is that there's a wonderful garden in San Francisco near Golden Gate Park that is working on developing these beautiful miniature landscapes that work with different amounts of rainfall inputs to work with the microclimates of San Francisco area. So when I went there, and I could, if you email me, I can try to remember what the name of that place is. But there's wonderful plants that grow with minimal water. And if you can kind of tap into resources that exist of people who know which ones will grow where, then there are opportunities there also.
And I would say using inline drip
Yes.
and heavy mulch layer. I mean, that's all we do for renovations anymore for shrubs is, you know, there's 3 really great manufacturers of inline drip, and gridding out your job with that, burying it in mulch, and then helping your customer understand the value of remulching. And, you know, writing it in the spec doesn't get it done. You know, the last Bay-Friendly rated project I did, it was written in the spec, and your challenge is with remulching a project, the job was, I think, 1,000 yards mulched. And the second time you mulch it, 3 or 4 years later, it's not going to be 1,000 yards after it all grows out. And so how do you write a spec and get your customer on board with the budget and remulching that project when nobody knows how many yards of mulch it's going to take in 3 or 4 years, right? And engaging them in that planning process, helping them budget, getting the contractor to project how much mulch might be needed, and getting them to actually do it as part of the sustainability of that site. And it's, in my experience, it's challenging to get the customer on board with that, and probably more challenging to get the contractors on board with it to help you.
I think that's a good point. These organics, in my experience, decline. Mulch goes away in 8 years or what, and our compost, we start to lose the effects of those nice yard waste composts in 3 to 4 years on these completely raw soil. So it's not like it's had a whole series. And I think if you look at the organic farming people during that transition period to get out of chemical farming, there's also hidden in that transition period a staggering of organic loading onto the soil, so that the stuff that you put on 4 years ago is finally really releasing its nutrients now this year. The stuff that put on 3 years ago is pretty good, but it's not quite ready, and the stuff you put on last year really isn't doing much for your whole setup, and the stuff you put on this year is really a mulch still. So there's an age progression and a maturity, a natural curing of these things that I think we need to be honest and say, you know, yard waste compost is good, but that's one load. You either have to have your plants putting all that carbon back in on their own, or you have to come in and redo it periodically if the plants aren't doing that cycle themselves. And mulch, unless they're laying down litter mulch, you got to remulch.
They're usually trying to get the contractor to blow all that off and clean that up.
Oh, yeah,
It's
whoop,
typical.
yeah, pay money to get
Get rid of it all.
get
Get rid of all your free organic. Yeah.
I think the soil depth is very important, especially for unstructured landscape. And I've been more and more dealing with the unstructured, and the client want to use that space as an event, such as like putting lawn. And how do you, like, you can't really mulch the lawn, so how do you keep?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah, blowing a little
We've got
bit.
lawns that have been growing for years with no fertilizer inputs, getting a very light layer of finely screened compost, and they're living on it.
And they then keep the evaporation and keep the soils filled up.
Will it help keep the salt buildup down?
Filled up,
Yeah, it depends. The one site I'm thinking of actually has reclaimed water, but that's another problem. But-
Then you recommended the depth of the soil for the lawn or structure.
I'm not sure I can answer that.
What's underneath it and how much water you putting on it. I mean, if it's solid underneath it, you gotta be able to either grow your lawn hydroponically or it has to drain off,
Well,
so.
we usually put the, the drainage mat under there with waterproofing, so the water will get in.
Well, what's under that? Is it permeable underneath that too?
It's a structure. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
it's structure.
concrete.
Oh, it's on concrete, oh, well.
You're kind of parking lot.
Nah, well,
But
okay.
it goes back to what we're talking, the greater depth you have, the more roots that can grow down in there, the more self-sustaining it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the trick is to get as much of that soil as you can, you know.
We'll fight with the structural. and-
Right, they're gonna tell you you got 3 inches.
Yeah.
And you can, they have green rocks too, you know.
And I would say fertigation's a good solution for overstructure like that too.
Erin, when you say mulch, do you mean compost? Or what, if you're using a bark mulch, do you use?
Yeah, don't use the term barking. That's one of the things, right? I mean, I'm still fighting my guys and they're writing in their proposal bark mulch. No more bark. It's all recycled wood waste at this point that's you're producing. It's at a varying level of being composted, but not very much, right?
Plus, some of the material does not have any green matter in it. It's just
Right.
wood.
It's wood, yeah. And so, and it composts in place on site. So, at my house, I use regular compost fines and mulch with that, but in a lot of commercial settings, you're gonna get erosion with that, so you get a heavier product. But, using pathway mulch or vineyard mulch, you all got different names for the same wood chip products.
Aaron, I have a question. This is kind of the contractor question. So we've talked about soil testing and we've talked about utilizing these more innovative and proper mulching techniques and then trying to work with existing soil. But you're an enlightened contractor, you're doing the sheet mulching things. I mean, I'm sure there's people in here who had to struggle with low bid jobs or not enlightened contractors, maybe contractors who want to be enlightened, but they're not there yet. So from your perspective, what kind of things should we be doing, or is it just persistence and stubbornness, or is there various sort of key points we should try to educate these people on?
Well, one thing from a different contractor perspective is that I look at landscape architects as my customers, right? Even though you're not paying the bill, the fact is that if I have to choose between you and a customer paying the bill, I'll actually choose you because you're going to lead to the next project, and the customer probably isn't. So that's one of the enlightened perspectives I have is you've got to keep your customer, and in this case, the architect, happy. The other thing is, drive for value over price. I love quoting, price is what you pay and value is what you get. Does anybody know who said that?
Woody Allen.
Warren Buffett. So how do you drive
Pretty close.
for value in the what you're going to get, right? You won't want the low bid. And how do you drive for value in your RFP? We work with both Marin County and City of Roseville have value-based RFPs. Their decision criteria isn't low bid. They don't take low bid. It's price is some percentage of their factor. And you all have the ability And these are public agencies, right, with public contracting law governing what they're doing, and they're doing it. So you all have the ability to help guide private or public customers to value-based RFPs. What's your decision criteria? Make your contractor right. What's your approach to soil management? You know, make them put that in their proposal, and you'll start to differentiate your contractors. Right qualifications they have to have. They have to have a Bay-friendly qualified person on staff. They have to have a certified landscape technician. Other qualifications like that that'll start to weed out the low bid contractors and get you a pool of contractors so that they're all together. Because I'll look at projects all the time and I'll look at who I'm bidding against and I'll decide whether I'm going to bid or not, because it can, you know, oftentimes it's a waste of my time to bid against some of these contractors that are the ones that I see the dusting of compost on the site instead of the 3 inches that was bid.
So you know this, and then maybe somebody else who's in your position at a contractor knows this, but he's not the guy out in the field that we have to deal with. So is it just a process of trickle-down education, or what?
Yeah, I think for me and my company, I'm not sure I would speak for all contractors, but looking at what the training is like within their company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a sustainability manager that's done soils training with all of the management level and some of the frontline employees. And soils 101, Dave, sand, silt, clay, right? I mean, the basics. And so, you know, in your value-based RFP, please describe the training program for the front line of, you know, you can drive to value in these things, and you can start to differentiate contractors. Take a 2-step process and do a qualification process, request for qualifications, then a request for proposals. You know, and your key is getting the low bid contractor out of the pool. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck with them if they get to bid on the project.
Going back to mulch, which has been one of my favorite substances for many, many years. It's miraculous. I was at a UC Davis event yesterday at which it was asserted that mulch encourages the development of large colonies of Argentine ants. Have you noticed this?
Sounds like a great thing, right? You're improving your soil biology and all of that.
But people don't like Argentine ants because they come in their kitchens and invade their households. And
Causes mushrooms too.
have you noticed this problem? I guess
haven't
that
seen
was
Argentine ants.
my question.
Argentine ants will not survive when it's very dry. They need moisture, which they get in irrigated lawns.
Mhm.
And I could imagine that a well-mulched lawn would also be moisture.
Mhm.
Now, whether it's enough, I don't know, but that's the ecological discerner whether they move into an area, whether they've got a moisture path.
It's the first
Wow.
negative thing I've ever heard about mulch.
It was the first negative thing I'd ever heard about mulch, and I went,
If they're real thick too, Caltrans has had problems with gophers getting in a thick mulch and girdling trees, but that's out where there's nothing else to eat, perhaps, you know, I don't know, but the fire guys bellyached about it, but I haven't heard from them lately, so I'm gonna say that's not one, but you might have some gopher problems, and this ant thing, I can imagine it, but I haven't seen it.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Linkso sells an Alhamri certified compost that has diesel turkey manure in it that we've had good luck with. Is there any concerns about putting animal waste or animal manure on the yard? Is there any environmental problems to be concerned with?
That's like the high octane compost is with the turkey manure.
Just be moderate with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and my concern would be the cost. So, where are you going to use it? You know, how much of it are you going to use? It might be great in your raised beds and, you know, your color beds or some perennial bed, but I wouldn't, you know, at probably 4 times the cost of regular organic.
It is amazing.
It is.
Amazing stuff. But just, you know, be careful.
So you got the green light, it's
Yeah.
On that same subject, I've heard just a shovel full per hole.
Yeah, well,
But the
minimize it,
diesel
mix it
compost,
in.
You get the diesel compost, you just use a shovel full, no more than a shovel full per hole for like
Yeah.
a 5-gallon truck.
Yeah, well,
Wait, a shovel full of turkey
Of the
litter?
diesel- No, this
No, it's
is the
composted.
pure diesel compost from Lisa. And
Yeah.
that was, I was just at a composting seminar at Levi Lane Weber, who makes their, the compost tea, the compost that they use to make the compost tea.
Yeah.
She was saying, it's a commercial compost, the diesel compost is the one to get, because it's reliably cured, but you only use a little bit, and then I've had a lot of success using just a little bit.
Do you know what the N percentage is on that stuff? Percent N? Do they publish that? No.
I'm sure we can find it.
I don't know.
I'm guessing it's 4 to 5% instead of the 1 to 2 in the typical. It's pretty high.
But it's
Yeah.
$90 an yard.
Wow. So that's
I'd,
more than
I'd,
10 times.
I'd put on more yard waste compost and get the same N out
Yeah.
of it.
Well, and just put more of it on. You get great results with 2 or 3 inches of compost.
So we can take one more question. James?
I'm curious, the soil volume equation, say volume to quality of soil, street trees, tree wells, structural soil, how we battle that in urban environments. And I guess, again, I don't know, we want to try to give them as much to get those roots out there, but it's a challenge, and compaction for pavements. Any comments?
Your question is on the volume necessary?
Well, it's a combination of volume and, I guess, the soil composition. There's soil structure, there's also...
We didn't talk about structural soil.
No, we didn't, yeah.
Well, you briefly touched on your one.
Oh, I just mentioned it. Just
Structural
say he's
soil.
gonna talk about it.
It's, to get the bridging criteria of structural soil, you're getting your gravels up into 70-80% gravel to get that bridging criteria to maintain the void where your soil is. So you got only 20% soil. So we do this. It's like that Raisin Bran commercial with the you got 6 bowls of this, but you only need 1 bowl of this to get the same soil volume for the tree. And so structural soil is just it's out there. There's a lot of different types.
Will it be used more like, say, in doing tunnels, or is that more of a value to do that versus structural soil? Or I guess what's your recommendations or your experience?
I don't know if I have one right there. We're currently trying to do suspended paving systems.
Okay.
And use just soil. Give the plant what it wants. That's really the best. Structural soil is, it's like it's growing the plants in gravel. It's a hydroponic system. It's the juries are coming in, I believe, on where this stuff stands since Cornell patented their stuff back in the 80s, and the results that we're seeing.
Some people say it's working and some not.
Yeah, it's not a disaster. Yeah, it's give the plants what they really like, and they do pretty good.
I feel so privileged that I don't have to produce a deliverable product of 80% cover, but what we've done on unirrigated things is decide what the plant type is, annual grass, perennial grass, shrubs, or trees, and we set moisture availability in millimeters or inches of water to get that plant from the last rain in May to the first rain in November. And those numbers go back to what the soil, sand, silt, and clay is, or the 20% soil in the gravel matrix, and we get a target value. And for us, since we don't do these kinds of amendments, it just tells us either how deep to rip and prepare soil, what the rooting depth is, And then when we run out of depth, we can't go more than 4 feet, then we start to space out the canopies. So in that way, when we get the job done in the summer, one wet up, and those plants are now ready to grow an annual grass, a perennial grass, a shrub, a tree, and we're done. And they'll grow into that volume until climate change happens, which might be next week, I don't know. But that's already set up. So that's our way to size our soil volume relative to our plant canopy. And with this 20%, we wore out the soil testing, and I said, here's what you need for your soil, and this woman from Duke came up to say, those are almost exactly the numbers I have, and all my trees die. And we started talking about how can there be this so wrong? And well, it turned out she's on the Copper River Delta up in Alaska, and she has 90% cobbles, and there's only 5 or 10% of this wonderful soil. Well, that's because you don't have very much of it, but it's good stuff.